Hey guys, this is Colin Warren. Welcome to my no BS guide to compressors. In this video, the next few minutes, I'll be going over for people kind of new to compressors, what kind of the core feature buttons, the common knobs are, as I'm sure, as some of you, if any of you are like me starting out, when you open up many of these compressors, you're like, oh my god, what are all these knobs do? So, I'm going to use in FL Studio, use FL's basic compressor to show you, okay, no matter what compressor you use, whether it's this, some third-party one, or if you go into FL Limiter, which has a compressor, each one of these has the same kind of 4 or 5 core knobs that do the same tricks. And then from there, they each may have their own 1 or 2, 3 other knobs that throws a little something different on top of the compression and what have you. But for now, I'm going to show you, okay, these are the core knobs. This is kind of the 80-20 principle about, okay, when you're using compressor, these are the knobs to focus on. So before we even get into, okay, what do all the knobs do, we need to remember, okay, why are we using compressing? Because it's not no use just throwing plugins on, just like, okay, yeah, I just like, seeing long reigns of long stacks of effects on my channel rack. So all you need to know about compressors, compressors are automated volume control. That's it. So if you ever have a track, for instance, like we'll have one in the background that we'll be using for this track. And I'll open up the output. Looking down here, and I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, I like the sound, but I want this sound to look a little bit more uniform, because if I'm looking here, this peak is a little bit higher than this low point here. I want to bring this peak down here, but I don't want to have to take a volume fader and write it every single time it peaks up, and then bring it back up when it's quiet, and do that. Compressors is a way to do that algorithmically using a plugin. That's all you need to know. So don't worry about, compressors, there's this, you can do, there are some compressors that give you some timbral sounds, not putting that aside, but at the very end of the day, the reason you pull up a compressor is for automated volume control. And if there's nothing else that sticks with you, it should be that point there. So now that you know what the purpose of a compressor is, I'm going to go ahead and show you the most basic compressor in FL Studio, just so we can get the basic concepts out of the way. And then I'll just show you where you can find other knobs and some other plugins, and now you can get a little bit more intuitive sense of if you have another third-party plugin or you're in another DAW together, what sort of the knobs and the names you're looking for. So first, we're going to pull up our output, and I'm going to hit play on our track again. So the first knob we'll go over, as we're looking at a track, is the threshold knob. The threshold knob tells us at what point, at what decibel level the compressor will kick in. That's it. So if I'm looking at this track, look to the top left, and you'll see where my mouse is hovering. That's telling me what decibel level my mouse is currently at in terms of the horizontal axis. So if the higher I go up above this line, that means the decibels get positive. And if I hit right at the line, it means if I go to 0, that means, okay, the decibel's at 0. If I go below that, the decibel starts to go negative. So if I have my threshold set at -16, I'm telling the compressor, okay, if a sound hits -16 dB, which in this case we're looking at the top left, it's about right here, then start compressing the track, which means, okay, start putting some volume automation. Looking at this track, just from a more practical point of view, this track is peaking around 2 to 3 dB, so we wouldn't want to go to -16. So instead we say, okay, I kind of want to flatten everything around 3 to 4 dB, so I'm going to go ahead and duck this back to 4 decibels. Put it right about there. Sweet. So we set that out. Now that we've set the threshold, next we'll look at the ratio. What the ratio does is this, okay, once this sound is hitting this threshold level, duck it back, for every decibel that goes above that, duck it back down to 1. So right now, because it's set to 1 decibel, or 1 to 1 decibel, it means it's letting everything through. But if I were to set it to, let's say, okay, I want to set it to 3.3 decibels. I'm telling the computer now, for every 3.3 decibels that are getting through, set it down to 1 decibel. So now it's starting to reduce it. So if I hit play, because I'm sure that if I'm talking in pretty abstract terms right now, so all you need to know from a more practical standpoint is the higher you increase this, the more it's going to compress. So spacebar, I'll pause it. See, look, now it's compressing, the peaks are higher. But now if I really crank it, kind of notice it. Let me actually put the threshold down lower so you can really notice the effect. So now if I have a higher ratio, see it's really compressing. But if I actually start to act like a limiter, as limiters are just compressors with really high ratios. But if I start to duck it back, you notice the compression goes back. Until I let it go. So that's what the ratio does. The higher you set it, the more it's going to compress. And if you set it high enough, it actually becomes a limiter, which means, okay, you're not letting anything past this point. So for our track, I find ratio levels completely depending on the purpose. For most elements, I find I'm putting it at like 2 to 3, 2 to 1, 3 to 1 ratio. That's kind of a good shorthand rule. If you're limiting, you may want to go lower, or if you're compressing something like vocals or something that has really crazy peaks, you may want to go higher. But if you need a short and fast rule as a beginner, I would say between 2 to 3, sometimes 4 decibels, or 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1 ratio should be good for you. So now that you know ratio, we're next going to go over the gain knob. So what the gain knob does here is, let's say we've gone through our track and we've compressed it really hard. You notice everything, even though it sounds a lot more combed together, it sounds really quiet. All this gain knob does is once we compressed it and set it at a lower volume level, allows us to set it back at the original level it was at, but now compressed. So if I hit this bass, whereas if I turn the compressor off, and I look back at it, pretty much at the same level, but not compressed. So that's all the gain knob does here. Just turns it back up once you compressed it. Finally, the other two knobs you'll need to worry about that are featured in pretty much every other compressor is the attack and release knob. All these knobs do is it tells you, okay, when the threshold hits, and this is the compression level you set it at, this is how quickly the compressor kicks in. So if I go to my master, look at our output. I set, let's say, a really high ratio, and I'll like the threshold really low, and turn the gain down, of course. So now, when I have a low attack, that means, okay, pretty much it's the compressor hitting right away. So when it goes, okay, any sound that goes above negative 26, hit it right away. That's what that sound's doing. However, if I start to duck the attack back, you're noticing it takes a lot longer for that compressor to go in. So if I really push it to the extreme, it takes a lot longer for that. But now if I shorten it, it does it right away. That's what the attack knob does. And it's really great in terms of practical purposes. If you want, let's say, the initial, what's called the transient, to stick through, or if, let's say, you have a sound you want to shape the transient so it has this little peak here, the attack knob is a great way to use that. Outside of that, to be honest, for most compressing purposes, I find I set it at about from 9 o'clock to, about 9 o'clock range. So if, again, looking for a short hand rule, it's about the spot I usually set it at for most tracks. Again, it depends from person to person, and as you get more complicated, you're going to have different uses for it. But if you're looking for a short and half and fast rule, anywhere from 9 to 8 o'clock should be good for you for most purposes. Finally, the release knob does a very similar thing to the attack knob does, except what release is telling the compressors, okay, given our threshold, so at this case negative 22 dB, if anything is below that or the sound ever comes below that, fade out the compression effect at this speed. So from a practical standpoint, what you need to know is that if you have a fast release time and you have at a given threshold, the compression will duck out right when it goes below that. But let's say, okay, let's turn up the release all the way. What happens if we turn it to the extreme of the other side? So what we're telling here is, okay, so let's say the sound here, or like these sounds here, for instance, they're below this 22.8 dB, or actually we can set even higher, set below this 17.5 dB. And even though it's below that, because the release time's so long, it's saying, okay, because it's below that, now take 4,000 milliseconds to take the compression off. So what you'll notice, what will happen is that the sound, even though in theory it's below the threshold level, the compressor will still be fading out, so it'll still have a compressed sound. So if we hit play, and I pull down the compressor, now if I take the release time, you notice it's chopping away because I have the release time of saying, okay, just chopping away quick. And now if I turn all the release all the way up, now it's saying, okay, take longer for the compressor to go away. So those are the 5 core knobs you'll see no matter what compressor you're in. So if let's say, okay, this one we're in basic 3D compressor. I'm gonna reopen that. Yeah, God, this thing's so finicky. And let's say, okay, those are the 5 knobs here. Now if you open up 3D limiter, it has its own compression section. And what do you know? It has a threshold, it has a threshold ratio knob right there. Has an attack right there. Has a release right there, and has the gain knob right there. You're noticing it also has some other knobs. It has like things like knee, which adjust, okay, given the compressor, how quickly, if it hits the threshold, how quickly does it start the attack and release algorithms and everything. There's some more complicated things you can get in there, but it's very core. You have threshold, ratio, attack, release. And finally, I'm sure some of you are asking about, okay, what's this type knob right here? What does it do? And at least doing some quick research online, it looks like for these different type knobs, or in some compressors, they're known as the knee knob, it tells the compressor, okay, once you hit this threshold, how quickly do you want to start the attack and release algorithm? So, okay, hits this threshold. If I have it set to hard, okay, I'm going to start the attack and release right away. Or going, yeah, so it'll go, the signal will go, okay, hits 22, above 22 dB. Okay, it's a hard type. That means I'm going to take 8.5 milliseconds to go up and start compressing. And now I'm going to press a ratio 11:1. And now, okay, the compression's done, so I'm going to release at a rate of 4 milliseconds. But let's say if I set it to a soft compressor, that means, okay, the sound hits 22 dB, but because I'm seeing a soft time, I'm going to take a little bit longer to start the attack, and it may, throughout the waveform, may do a little bit, it may not compress as hard, which is why the soft is called soft. But to be honest, if you go in and you mess around with these knee and soft and hard knobs, the difference is barely noticeable, even to my ear. Like, I had to really strain and listen to it. So for kind of the 80-20 things you need to focus on to like really get the most out of your compressor, just remember your threshold that tells the sound, okay, at this level, this is where the sound is coming in, or start compressing at this given level. When you start the compression, compress at this ratio. So the higher the ratio, that means the more it's going to smash those dynamics. If you set a really high ratio, it becomes a limiter. The gain knob, what that does is once you've compressed the sound, if you want to bring it back to the same level you had before it was compressed, you can do it with this gain knob. And the attack knob tells the compressor, okay, when a sound has reached this given threshold, ramp up the compression at this speed. So if I start at a short speed, it brings up the compression really quick. If I set it longer, it brings those transients it lets those transient through before starting to compress. And the release, of course, is telling the computer, okay, if you hit this negative 22 decibel level, or actually if anything goes below that, release the compressor off at this given rate. That's all you need to know. Again, remember, compression is nothing more than automated volume control. And I encourage you to go back into your given DAW, start to mess around with your compressor, because I know there's, if you're anything like myself, messing around with these different things, like, it just seems so abstract. You're like, okay, this decibel level, I don't even know what decibels are, or like trying to name it, or what milliseconds. So really go around, mess with these knobs, push them to the extreme. Like, okay, what happens if I have a hard threshold and a high ratio? Maybe duck the threshold back, adjust the attack and release times. And that way you start to get a more intuitive sense what each of these knobs do. That way, once you get a sense of that, you can go to pretty much any compressor and you can understand how it works. So that's been this tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did like this video, the No BS Guide to Compression, be sure to give this video a like. Hit subscribe if you want more tutorials. I'll be trying to put more of these out, maybe 1 or 2 a week. And in addition, if you really like these videos and you'd like to help me put food on the table and or pay for college, I've got a bunch of tutorial courses, Udemy courses you can check out down below. With that, hope you guys enjoyed this course. Hopefully this was helpful. And yeah, before you keep watching these videos too long, go into FL Studio or whatever DAW you're in, practice this concept, and then use it to go out and make some kick-ass tracks. So go do it.